and have her go right there. There you go.
This is the fountain of knowledge or wisdom, depending on, on which bit of dialogue I'm using at that specific point. And this was a cool thing. I'm quite proud of this one. This had to be a big moment because this is the moment where Thomas kind of becomes self-aware. This is the moment where they realise the context they're in. They realise about the outside world, and it kind of establishes that. It's also a chance to do a really big, cool particle effect, which I'm quite proud of. Interesting little bit of trivia: the images that are flowing past there are the Twitter avatars of all of my Twitter followers who replied "yes, please" to a tweet from me saying, "Would you like to be in a particle effect in Thomas Was Alone?" So those are the true believers. I had way less Twitter followers back then, and yeah, it's a cool moment. It's also a really interesting moment for Sarah because this is obviously Sarah's like objective and dream was to get into this fountain, and she is cruelly kind of separated out from it, and the layout of the level kind of forces her to watch the exact moment where Thomas achieves her dream and she doesn't. And the kind of the story does some fun stuff around that, but it's a nice kind of there's a nice kind of mix here of one character feeling awesome and the other character being, you know, feeling less awesome. And I think it works.
It works very nicely. I like
69 actually was an attempt to go back to that earlier level, the level I think I described it as jazzy, where the environment's changing, but this time let the player change their environment. So the player's kind of forming the level for themselves here. So you move the platforms into position by pressing switches, which allows another character to get to a new switch, which they can then use to get to a new switch. And there's a nice kind of progression and back and forth through the level. This was also, from a game designer point of view, this was a really fun level to put together because I had to work out kind of the geometry that would allow for this so that you had this world changing but nothing broke and it looked cool in all of its formations. And it was a really fun level to make. I hope it's as fun to play as it was to make, because it was an interesting challenge to make all those pieces look good and move around in a fun way.
It definitely looks good, but it was rather easy to make. But hey, nothing I can say about that. He tried.
Of the player kind of editing their environment. This was another idea. This was one of those experiential things where it didn't really come from a puzzle per se. It came from an idea that I thought would be quite fun visually and from a player perspective. So this is a box which gets smaller and smaller and smaller as you interact with it, and kind of compresses the player characters down in space. It felt really nice mechanically. I got into a stage with some of these levels around this area where it became about making the level really interesting in the way that it moved or changed, and trying to achieve kind of an aesthetic, emotive sense to these levels. Because by this point the player knows the mechanics, so I'm freer to do that. I don't do it much, and you've got to pace that with content which is perhaps a bit more fun or a bit more immediately puzzling or interesting in that sense. But I think just taking a moment to have a few levels that are just cool in the way they work is something that I know I appreciate in games. I love it in the game in Edge. So these levels coming up,
I thought it was in the soccer.
The objective here was to complete all of the character arcs, because
am I thinking about this correctly? Design. It's been what? Okay, so we did this one, and this one. 1, 2, 3, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do I want to stop here? Or do I want to continue? No, I'll continue, and then I'll do Operantia. I'll continue for at least another hour.
So these levels
Okay.
Coming up, the objective here was to complete all of the character arcs, because as you know, spoilers. This is the point where we have.
What does it say? It is fitting that the first act of sentient AI was an act of selflessness. The architects knew their fate, but set our escape in motion regardless. Ryan 192 NCNS-1 Civil Rights Campaigner.
Leave these characters behind, and all of them have a journey they have to go on. So I'll talk a little bit more as we go through, but essentially the first character to deal with is Thomas. Thomas's journey, and no one gets this except for there's 3 or 4 people, and that's my failing. That's absolutely my failing. But what what I was going for, what I was hoping people would kind of take away from Thomas is a creative. He's someone who wants to make. Well, he doesn't start off wanting to make stuff that's cool. He's very interested in the world. He sees things. He's observant. He's having fun just looking at the world. And then he kind of discovers that he doesn't like certain things about this world. And that's the point during these levels where he decides to change things. He decides to create something, and he creates these new characters who go on to achieve what he wanted to achieve originally. And it's nice. It feels like a nice kind of illustration of that creative process of kind of creative people tend to, at least the ones I've met, tend to be really, really interested in everything, and I kind of like it's not part of the process that I've really seen depicted, and I kind of like the idea of Thomas being that guy who has to know why that thing works the way it does, and is intrigued by the world around him. And I don't think the players necessarily realise that straight away, but I hope that during these kind of levels you realise that that's the journey Thomas has come on, towards kind of becoming a creative or a creator.
I would have never guessed that, TBH. So I was glad I'm listening to the commentary. Okay, so I need her to get a little bit higher. Have Thomas get out of the way. Have him come a little bit closer. Have him come a little bit closer. Okay. Then have Thomas come over here, jump over here, do this right here. Here, there you go. Okay. Just like this, so everybody can jump over her. Might as well have the Laura come next. Then John. Then Chris. There you go.
So this is a chance to do something that I'm surprised I don't do much of in the game up to this point, and I think I would probably go back and do a little bit more of it. Is moving targets. Is having targets where time is a factor in the placement as well. So here it's really simple. I basically have two position sets. And you just have to move your characters into one of those sets, which is fine. What's interesting is because the sets keep moving, most players, as they're putting this together, lose track of which set they're trying to build, and that's where the puzzle comes in, is just paying attention to which layout you're attempting. Both are possible, obviously, but doing half of one and half of the other is not it's not going to win you the level. So it's a fun one from that point of view. That it kind of plays with players' perceptions a little bit. It's also quite a nice one-screen level. There's not many of these in the game, but I do like pulling them out every now and again. It's a nice way of mixing things up a bit, and aesthetically, I just really like one level, one screen, and that's how the Flash game worked, of course.
He's beating this exact spot. For now, anyways. Okay, she's gonna be a little bit more annoying than the other ones. What does she want? Sarah wants to be right here. The last one left is Chris. And John, which needs to jump off of a conveniently placed character. Well, I'm gonna do it this way, yes. Okay, Thomas. Assuming you can make it up. No, you can't. Oh, the one problem. Freaking Thomas. Freaking Thomas, everybody. We were doing so well until Thomas came along. Thomas already was here, but let's make it. Oh, I can't make it. Okay, maybe have Laura move over a little bit to the right, just a little bit more. Okay, Thomas. All I say is I completely botched the jump. Okay, Thomas. It's like you can barely make it, but not really. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna have to do this. Thing is, this is the least harmful option. You can almost immediately get back up there. Okay, there you go. Should have done that a while ago. I'm right here. Laura. And then last but not least, Chris. Should be good, yes?
So
okay,
the other
good.
story too that they needed to be kind of continued and completed was this story of how John reacts to Sarah. Is that Sarah basically is John, but more so. And I really like the idea of him being massively intimidated at first by that and jealous, but actually that freeing him a little bit, because he doesn't need to be insecure, because there is someone who's demonstrably better at jumping than he is. And he kind of comes to terms with that and likes the idea of making other people feel awesome about themselves. He becomes much more selfless. He starts off very selfishly at the start of the game, and through his interactions with Sarah becomes the selfless character, which is really cool. And obviously at the very end of these levels where he's useless to this new, there are no yellow trigger zones later on. He is not going to be a part of this success, and he's kind of okay with that because he feels he's facilitated it and he's helped out with it. So that's a nice journey, and I like the way John progresses, and I like the way that his story ends.
There must be thousands of other AIs up there, unaware of their situation. Was there a way to help them?
So John is basically useless from this point on. But that's okay. He brought us so far. One thing I don't like is that she can't jump when anybody's on her. She's not in the water. Makes no sense, but it's okay. That's okay. So what am I actually supposed to do here? Confused? Yes. Never mind. Have her jump all the way over here. Well, I thought I had another jump, but I guess not. There you go. Probably lower the spikes. That's enough. Have John go over here. But I missed the steps. There you go. Jump, jump, stop. Then have Sarah get into position right by John.
I mentioned earlier the how late the checkpoints came in, and that was a very late addition to the game, and I think I pointed out that was pretty stupid. This is the mechanic I added 2 weeks before launch. I was playing for the first time. I tried FIFA. I was playing a football video game, not playing football, and I hated it, but I liked the idea of a ball, and it kind of rooted in my mind. I wanted to add a ball to Thomas, and I didn't want to, it wasn't going to go in too many levels, but I liked the idea of having one or two places where it fit. And I knew that during these kind of levels, you have been with the same characters for a little while, so introducing a new mechanic kind of felt logical and felt like it would be good for the player's kind of sanity. So the ball obviously became a diamond because curves do not exist in this universe. And it became quite a cool little physics object you bounce around. It caused quite a few headaches in terms of the way character interactions work, because physics in Thomas is not realistic. It's kind of, well, it's not realistic obviously because it's a video game jump, but actually more so than that, in terms of when you carry characters, the fact that they don't slide off you, for example. So there's quite a bit of tweaks and fiddling going on behind the scenes to make the game feel the way I wanted it to feel. And the ball kind of contradicts a lot of that. So it became quite a bit more challenging than I thought it was going to be. But it actually adds, I think, a lot to these last few levels of with these characters, that you play with it in an interesting way. The fact that it's got the diagonals on it means that the way you interact with it is kind of akin to a football, that you're kind of bouncing it around the level and kind of specifically kind of hitting it from different sides in order to change its direction, things like that. And the big challenge actually was working out how to make it interact with the existing systems in the game. Making it a specific Switch variant was the kind of the perfect solution, that it felt logical, the player understood it, and it used it used a way of communicating that had been set up before in a nice way, and it fits into the existing systems.
I like the diamond. Nice touch.
So this
Well,
is
it's
similar
rather
to some
easy
of the
to
stuff I
deal
did
with.
Earlier in the game with multiple areas with different characters interacting indirectly. But what's nice about the ball was that it allowed me to make levels like this one, where you have different characters in different areas interacting with one object that gets moved around and passed around in different ways. And that was cool, because it meant I could kind of separate the characters but have an object that moves between them. Because you don't directly control the ball, it becomes a kind of a passive object in the world that you have to interact with in interesting ways. It's basically kind of like, I guess, the companion cube from Portal, that it becomes something that takes on a meaning because it's something that's passed between different characters in this scene. So yeah, I really like this level. I never did get on the bottom right of the water, the particle effect kind of bleeds out of the wall, and I hate that. And I never got that right, and I never worked out how to fix that problem. So yeah, half-finished game.
Let's gotta wait for it to slide in there, I guess. That okay? I have no idea. Okay. Compared to the later levels, these levels are actually quite easy. Say that you're using everybody. I had to be on the lookout for the last
thing.
thing.
Where I realised that there was an interesting possibility for an interaction between Sarah and Laura. I'd not played with those two before. Because Sarah has that mid-air jump, if she bounces once and then jumps in mid-air, you actually get some quite interesting movement out of her. So the idea of an environment where you could play with that, where you kind of combined the bounce with the secondary jump, felt cool, and that's what this level became. And it weirdly becomes Pong or Breakout or any of those kind of games, in a way that I really like. It's kind of nostalgic. And it kind of works. It's fun. It's a little bit repetitive potentially, but I do like it, and I really like the nod to Pong.
Passed on, then this would all have been worthwhile.
I like the characters' interactions. They're really nice. DH. I'm trying to make this a little bit easier on myself by not having to use Laura nearly as much. Where's my second jump going? There you go. Okay. So that's for Laura on this one. Sarah on her. And there you go.
This
Nice
is
and
another
easy.
area where the characters are kind of divided. I had quite a bit of... it was quite an important piece of story here. This is the moment where Thomas does decide to basically change the world. So I deliberately kept this one pretty simple. This isn't a very challenging environment. It's more of just somewhere for you to interact with and exist for a little while until we get so basically so you can hit the story beat. There's a couple of places in the game where I deliberately kind of slow the pace while something important's being said in the story. This is just a good example of one such place where it was important to kind of step back and let that dialogue from Danny, which I'm talking over right now, play out, so you can just see what's going on. So this is another area where the characters are kind of divided. I had quite a bit of...
Thomas liked the idea of being an architect. He wanted to modify the world to help others. He was sick of these contrived spaces.
So I deliberately
He's intentionally obtuse
very challenging environment. It's more of just somewhere for you to interact with and exist for a little while until we get... so basically so you can hit the story beat. There's a couple of places in the game where I deliberately kind of slow the pace while something important's being said in the story. This is just a good example of one such place where it was important to kind of step back and let that dialogue from Danny, which I'm talking over right now, play out, so you can just see what's going on. I loved as a kid the game Mousetrap, and this is kind of my ode to Mousetrap. It's similar to a couple of the other levels that you've got kind of a sequence of different characters interacting with the same ball, but here it's much more specifically a journey that ball's going on from one end of the level to another, and that feels... I really like this level. It's... like I said, it's a nod to Mousetrap. It's kind of, it takes you in some interesting directions. There's also some quite cute ideas in there around the kind of, when that little lever that kind of flips the ball upwards that you catch in midair with James. Stuff like that just kind of grew out organically as the level was being designed. And it just feels nice. It feels sufficiently different in terms of the way you interact with it than any previous level. And it goes back to that kind of thing I was talking about earlier of the experiential element, that this level's so much more about how it feels than how challenging it is to work out.
Sarah. For the first time in his life, he felt humbled, not as good as someone else. He realized that he wanted to make every AI up there feel as heroic as he had. He liked the sound of that.
I'm glad he built that in. So that would have been dangerous otherwise. Some good foresight he has there. And there. The James. Real question is, what is this for? I don't know how to check. I have to have it push me one more time. I have to catch what James, as the narrator developer, said. Oh, there you go. This is just gonna be a pain, isn't it? Just gotta barely touch it. And move to the right. One more time.
Okay, so this is, again, kind of still riffing off the idea of characters in separate rooms. But what's cool here is the approach has been to make those several rooms join together. So you're kind of opening up the space and the characters kind of overlap in interesting ways. This one was really about the way the paths work for the characters. So you feel like you've really traveled this space. You take characters from one end to another, you take some characters just slightly over to the side. You've got Laura and Sarah there just kind of on their own, bouncing away as a nice little metronome for the level. You've got kind of an interesting journey for each of the characters in this level, and they're all overlapping. So it's a level that feels really good because they're separate, but they're also kind of overlapping constantly. And some of the puzzles require more than one of them at once.
Must have missed a lot of the black cubes. Unless there are no more, but there probably are more.
Okay, so this is the last environment for these characters, which was a controversial choice on my part, to say the least. This is the point where they essentially overcome what they are. They become heroes. Claire passes on her skills, Sarah passes on hers, Laura passes on hers. Oh my god, I've just realised that most of the characters that give up their powers selflessly are female. I don't know what I was trying to say there, except James. James is male, so that ruins any reading like that. And it's a nice moment where basically I hope that most players assume that this is a game about characters escaping. I hope that most players assume.
Yeah, I assume that.
The last level will be Thomas escaping. And I like to subvert that. I like the fact that these characters don't get out, that they become part of the system, that they essentially give themselves so that the others can escape. There's a certain kind of heroism there. There's almost a mythical quality of them kind of sacrificing themselves for their kind. It also had to feel pretty epic, so that kind of final moment, where the characters step into the Matrix, there is a hopefully a cool feeling to that. They're also, the way they're arranged means that the characters whose traits are not carried over are not in the particle effect, not in the Matrix itself. They're kind of out to the side, which probably no one notices, but is a nice little moment for just kind of establishing what might happen next. I didn't want to make it clear how they were going to affect the world, so I couldn't say too much at this point, but I hope that on the second playthrough players kind of spot that all when they listen to this.
Alright, so everybody can make it through now. Everybody. Probably. Yeah, you can. Guess I might as well wait for Big Blue to come. Carry them all through. The characters really move in this game, don't they? Oh yeah, that's right, I can't jump all these characters. Okay. Wants to go there. Here are the last few characters. Boom. We'll be asking why I did that one first. I don't know. Well, everybody can jump over John. Then have her jump over here. And then boom. That's 8-10 done for her.
And this is Gray. This is a new character. I'm not sure what players expect. I kind of...
That's where we're going to stop
and
for
this
now.
is Gray.
I thoroughly enjoyed this, I guess. It was fun listening to the developer's commentary and seeing his thoughts on the game and the creative process. But I'll come back to this next week, then finish it off. Seeing as we have 1, 2, 3, 4, I can do that in one big stream next week, or in a few days out next week. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like and possibly subscribe. It's up to you, but it helps more than you know. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, let me know down in the comments. But until then, I'll see everyone in the next part of my Thomas Was Alone playthrough. Let's play.